Hiltz & Associates is the company behind Dental Fraudbusters, dentistry's most popular fraud protection website. Next, in our typical case of dental embezzlement, the dentist considers options for restitution and prosecution.
Okay, so welcome back, and let's talk about restitution and prosecution now that our embezzler has been caught. And what I mean by that is that we have evidence to show that a crime has been committed and a theft has occurred. And unfortunately, statistics show that more than 40% of practice owners will receive no financial restitution whatsoever. Let's talk a little bit about sources of restitution, and that's when you want your money back. Look, and I've talked to so many dentists over the years who have said to me, well, it's only $10,000, it's only $20,000, it's only $30,000. I'm not going to care about it. And they just want to absolve their problem, their responsibility of holding this person accountable, because they feel it's just not worth the time and effort. Restitution, your propensity for restitution really depends on how much money has been stolen and your own sensitivity to it. I've also had doctors who have said to me, if it's $5, I want it back. I want that person held accountable. So restitution means you want your money back. And again, like I said, most of these embezzlers are first-time offenders. Those that are serial embezzlers, both categories usually do not have any assets. They've spent the money, they haven't sequestered it away into, an IRA or a savings fund or put it into equity or property. They don't have any money. And as my grandmother used to say, you can't get blood from a turnip. So where can you get your money back? Well, one of the sources, and the primary source for many practice owners, is employee dishonesty insurance. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in detail in a moment. But employee dishonesty insurance is intended to cover you for the dishonest acts of your employees, and that is included in what's called your commercial general liability insurance. And most of these have $5,000 to $100,000 in coverage plus endorsements. I'll talk about endorsements a little bit in a minute. And sometimes the perpetrator will come and offer on bended knee an offer to make restitution. Now, this is usually done immediately after the person has been caught. So in many cases, it may be crocodile tears. They're coming to you and they're saying, please don't report me to police. I'll pay back the money. You have to be very careful. If you fire someone for theft or you catch someone for theft and they come on bended knee, in an emotional state offering to make restitution, you can consider restitution, but it should be done in a legal agreement. The moment you accept payment from a thief, now you've entered into a civil matter, not a criminal matter, and it'd be very difficult to prosecute after you have even verbally given your dishonest employee an opportunity to say, okay, well, yeah, you can pay it back. Now, civil, you have restitution through civil means. And again, civil means that you're going to go to court and you have to meet the burden of civil proof. And usually in the forensic audits that I'll do, or if you have if you have a professional do your investigation, you'll have uncovered a preponderance of evidence that you can use in a civil trial. Now, what a preponderance of evidence means is doesn't mean that you've got a lot of it. It doesn't mean you walk in with volumes and volumes of information. What it means is that you have sufficient evidence that would convince a rational person, based upon the evidence that you are presenting, that what you are claiming happened. It's reasonable to presume that it happened. Now, the problem with civil litigation is that it can be expensive to litigate. And moreover, you can't get blood from a turnip, so you're going to want to make sure that when you do litigate, or if you consider litigation, that the person you're going after has assets, which may be joint ownership in a home. They may have cars or land. In some cases, they may have inherited something that it can't be easily converted into cash, like land. So you want to do your homework if you decide that you want to sue. Now let's move on. Let's talk about employee dishonesty insurance. And there are 7 broad insuring agreements that come with most CGL policies, or some CGL policies. Now, CGL stands for Commercial General Liability. That's your business insurance. That's the policy that insures you for fire, flood, theft, property theft, damage to your property. And when you look at your business insurance policy, you may have an inclusion for employee dishonesty. Most policies include a little bit for employee dishonesty, and this is meant to protect you against financial losses caused by employee theft. Not only money, it could be artwork, it could be something of value, it could be dental supplies, it could be dental equipment. Right? So it's property theft, which includes money, that's been removed by the dishonest acts of an employee. Now, there's forgery or alteration. This is sometimes included in one of these agreements, and again, it would be in your insurance. If you have it, you'll see it there. If not, you can ask your insurance agent whether or not you can obtain this. And this is really depositor's forgery. And what this does is this insures you against losses because of an employee either writing or signing or altering a financial document or a check. And so, for example, this could be when an employee takes a check that's made out to you from the insurance company, flips it over and writes your name on the back, and then deposits it into their own account. Now, you'll see some with money orders and counterfeit paper currency fraud. And, you know, money orders sound so 70s. I don't even know if they're used anymore, but it's still terminology that's used in these different broad insuring agreements. And money orders and counterfeit currency coverage is for when your business accepts cash or a money order or a check that you believed was legitimate but was later found out to be counterfeit. So someone comes in and pays you not with an NSF check. Right? An NSF check is drawn on someone's account and they just didn't have non-sufficient funds. This is someone who comes in and gives you a check, and that check turns out to be counterfeit, or gives you currency and that currency turns out to be counterfeit. Computer fraud and funds transfer fraud. In this digital age, having computer fraud and funds transfer fraud insurance is important. And this will cover losses of property directly caused by computer fraud. Now, that's not an employee going in and adulterating your records to mask the concealment of removal of money. This is to cover things that are fraudulently transferred. So, for example, transferring money out of your accounts or using a computer to defraud you in certain ways. Now, there's also included in the computer fraud, you'll see sections that are called electronic data restoration, and computer fraud could also be related to cybercrime. There's also client property coverage. This would be coverage for your equipment, X-ray machines, laptop computers, digital cameras, and so on. Credit card coverage. That's if you have credit cards that you give employees to use to purchase things for your practice, and they use those in a malicious way. And expense coverage. Now, expense coverage is usually included as an endorsement if it is offered, and it's called an endorsement or a claim expense coverage, and that's intended to offset the cost of hiring an outside professional, an accountant, an attorney, a consultant, or someone like me, to determine the amount and the extent of the loss. Now, not all policies have claim expense, and when it is offered, it is typically between $2,500 to $10,000. Now, I've had some clients who didn't even know they had this, and they find out that they have $10,000 in professional fee endorsements, which is very helpful to them, because the last place you want to be is to have to pay auditing fees on top of the losses that you've incurred. So if you don't have expense coverage in your business policy, ask your broker or your agent whether or not it can be obtained. And I recommend having about $10,000 in expense coverage. Here's some examples of employee dishonesty insurance. These are actual policies. I've done a couple of screenshots here. So just to give you a comparison of what some policies offer. Now, this is a common policy. If I won't name the insurance company here. And you'll see here that there are two sections. There's employee dishonesty to a maximum of $25,000 and forgery and alteration to a maximum of $25,000. The rest of the stuff down here is for property and so on. So there's only two of those agreements in this particular policy. Now let's look at another policy, and you can see here between the two yellow lines, the first yellow line at the top and the second yellow line at the bottom, between valuable papers and credit card forgery, these are all of the additional perils that are insured by this particular insurance coverage. And you'll see the limits are $50,000, $15,000, and so on. The employee dishonesty, which is underlined in red, has an additional $25,000 in insurance. And in fact, this was a company that a dental practice that I did an audit for, and the amount was, I think it was in the $40,000 or $43,000 range. So they had adequate coverage to cover for the acts of employee dishonesty. And you'll see depositor forgery and some other things that are there as well. So it's important that when you renew your policy at the end of the year, that you ask about employee dishonesty coverage and whether there are any endorsements to help you pay for the fees that you're going to pay, that you will incur to pay for your policy. So now let's talk about criminal conviction. Now, restitution, again, your best bet is going to be employee dishonesty insurance in most cases. Sometimes, again, if you have an employee that has assets, then that has to be treated a little bit differently. But I'm talking here about the typical case. And the typical case is your only source of restitution is from your employee dishonesty policy. Let's talk about criminal conviction. That's the big one. That's the one that has the highest burden of proof. And unfortunately, many cases are not even prosecuted. And it's a function of, public money. I've seen cases where there's been tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars that have been stolen, and district attorneys do not prosecute. And there are idiosyncratic reasons for that, which I won't go into in this course, but criminal convictions do occur, but the evidence has to be strong, clear, and compelling. And in criminal prosecution, criminal conviction is going to require, to get a conviction criminally, you either have to have a guilty plea or evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. So you can imagine someone who has stolen $30,000 from a dental practice in cash, and they've taken that cash over-the-counter payments, $20, $50, and $100 at a time. There are hundreds of transactions that have been that have been stolen from the practice, hundreds of cash payments, small amounts. And now, beyond a reasonable doubt, if I were the defendant in that case, I would require every single patient that paid money to the practice to come in and testify that they gave me the money. So, district attorneys and prosecutors sometimes don't have an appetite to prosecute theft of cash when it's small amounts and multiple transactions. But again, that's the typical case. Now, if you do get court-ordered restitution, sometimes it's difficult to collect. Again, it's the blood out of the turnip. It's all right for the court to say, you, the perpetrator, had to pay back the employer, the dentist, $50,000. But in many cases, it's up to you, the victim, to enforce that court order. Now, certain states have automatic enforcement, like California, where they'll garnish your wages and they'll automatically report your gains to the IRS. Other states don't. So if you're in a state that won't automatically order this restitution, you have to go, and you've got an order now from the court that says, my former employee has to pay me $50,000. You got to bring that to the sheriff, and you have to say to the sheriff, look, I've got this order, this person owes me $50,000, and here's where the money is. It's in this bank account or that bank account. Don't expect law enforcement to go out and continuously try to enforce this order and get the money. And the other thing is that even though if it's a criminal prosecution, they cannot go bankrupt on a criminal court order for restitution, many times these people just don't have the money to pay it back. And if you go on Dental Fraud Busters website, you'll see dozens and dozens of cases where perpetrators have been ordered to pay back tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to their former employer, and they're just not going to be able to do it. Not because they're too old, they don't make enough money, and they can't make enough money in their lifetime to be able to repay it back. And what about lock her up? Well, in sentencing, if you do get a conviction, you've got to understand many embezzlers, in the typical case, are first-time offenders, and many will avoid prison. They'll get a felony record. They'll get a criminal record, and all the bad baggage that goes with that, but they will avoid jail. They may get ankle monitoring. They may have to do community service. They may have to do house arrest for a while. But, white-collar crime, first-time offender, female, probably a mother, a grandmother, has probably taken care of her parents at home. Judges don't have an appetite to put people like that behind bars. They want to punish them, and they will, but they don't have an appetite to put them behind bars. Serial embezzlers, when you've got your second strike and your third strike, and if you make it to a fourth strike by going to a different state, you're going to end up in prison. So here's the Dental Fraud Busters website, and because you're a member of Dental Fraud Busters, by taking this course, I'm just going to show you a couple places where you can go. Over here, you can see where the blue thing is. There's a busted category, there's a members category, and there's a tips category. And in the busted category, you're going to find all the news articles related to these tags down here. These are by state and by dollar amount. So, for example, if I look at the busted category, these are all people who've been wanted, charged, or convicted of dental embezzlement. And I'm going to select now the $100,000 to the $250,000. And these are cases across the country where people have been convicted. Now remember, a lot of these don't make it to the news. There's one and another. There's a few here familiar faces that I was involved with. So when you go to Dental Fraud Busters, you can look if you're going to hire somebody, if you want, go in and have a look and see what's happening in your state. Again, this is only not comprehensive because it can't include every criminal conviction that's here, but there's quite a few of them here, and I think it's a learning experience to go through and have a look at it. So that concludes this lesson. And one of the last things that I want to say to people who are taking this course is remember, fraud protection doesn't have to feel like this. There are some simple things that you can do, and I'm going to mention these in other lessons, not included in this course. There's about 10 different things that you can do to reduce your risk of embezzlement by 80%. It is not rocket science. There's not hundreds or thousands of ways to steal. And the cases where you hear that have these well thought out schemes where people open up second bank accounts or deposit funds elsewhere or redirecting, these are not the typical cases. These are the exceptional cases. 80 to 90% of dental embezzlement follow these typical rules, exactly what I've been talking about in this course. So thanks for attending, and this ends this lesson.